The Unexpected World of Rat Social Behavior, a revelatory experiment in the quiet laboratories of behavioral psychology. A simple yet profound experiment would challenge our understanding of prejudice, social conditioning, and the origins of discrimination. This study, focusing on seemingly ordinary laboratory rats, would unveil extraordinary insights into how social groups form, reject, and potentially accept differences. The experiment began with a straightforward but carefully designed methodology. Researchers separated two groups of rats, white rats and black rats, raising them in completely isolated environments. These groups were kept unaware of each other's existence, growing up in their own distinct social bubbles, experiencing only their own color and type. When the moment of first contact arrived, the results were stark and unsettling. A black rat introduced into the environment of white rats was immediately met with rejection. The white rats displayed clear signs of ostracism, treating the newcomer as an alien, an outsider to be pushed away and marginalized. Their behavior was not just passive avoidance, but active exclusion, a microcosm of territorial and discriminatory behavior. But the experiment didn't end there. In a crucial twist, researchers created another group of rats raised together from birth, white and black rats sharing the same living space from their earliest moments. The difference in outcome was remarkable and hopeful. When a new black rat was introduced to this integrated group, the reception was dramatically different. These rats, having grown up knowing diversity as their normal state, accepted the newcomer without hesitation. There were no signs of the previous hostility, no attempts to exclude or marginalize based on color. The implications of this study reach far beyond the world of laboratory rats. It presented a compelling argument about the nature of prejudice, suggesting that discrimination is not inherent but learned. The rats were not naturally racist. They were conditioned by their environment and early experiences. This experiment illuminated a critical psychological principle. Social attitudes are not predetermined but shaped by exposure and early interaction. Isolation breeds suspicion and fear of the unknown, while integration and early positive experiences foster acceptance and understanding. The study challenges us to reflect on our own social dynamics. How much of our prejudices are truly our own, and how much are they the result of limited exposure and segregated experiences? The rats became a mirror, reflecting our own complex social behaviors back at us. Researchers noted that the rats' behavior mirrored human social patterns in disturbing ways. Just as these rats reacted differently based on their upbringing, human societies demonstrate similar patterns of acceptance or rejection based on early social conditioning. The experiment wasn't just about rats, but about the fundamental human capacity for empathy, understanding, and the potential to overcome inherent biases. It suggested that prejudice is not an immutable characteristic, but a malleable social construct that can be reshaped through intentional exposure and positive interaction. In the end, these small rodents offered a powerful lesson. Acceptance is not born, but learned. Diversity, when introduced early and positively, becomes not a threat, but a natural state of being. Social conditioning plays a crucial role in forming group attitudes. Early exposure to diversity can significantly reduce prejudicial behaviors. Isolation and segregation naturally breed suspicion and exclusionary tactics. Acceptance is a learned behavior, not an innate limitation. The rat experiment stands as a powerful testament to the plasticity of social behavior and the profound impact of early environmental experiences. Experiment 2. The Power of Expectations, Unraveling the Self-Fulfilling Prophecy. In the world of social psychology, few experiments have been as revelatory and profound as the self-fulfilling prophecy studies. These groundbreaking investigations shed light on a fundamental human truth. Our expectations can dramatically transform reality, particularly in the educational settings. Imagine a classroom where potential is not predetermined, but malleable, where a simple belief can fundamentally alter a student's academic trajectory. This is precisely what researchers set out to explore in a series of revolutionary experiments that would challenge everything we thought we knew about learning and potential. The experiment was elegantly simple in its design, yet profound in its implications. Researchers gathered a group of students and their teachers, creating a standard classroom environment. At the outset, all students underwent a comprehensive academic skills test. The scores, however, were not the true focus of the study. Instead, the researchers implemented a clever manipulation that would reveal the extraordinary power of expectation. Randomly selected students were identified to the teachers as exceptional, gifted individuals who showed remarkable potential. These students were not actually different from their peers. Their selection was entirely arbitrary. The teachers were subtly informed about these supposedly brilliant students, creating an invisible expectation that would soon work its psychological magic. As the school term progressed, something remarkable began to unfold. The teachers, unconsciously influenced by the belief that certain students were exceptional, started to interact with these students differently. They offered more attention, provided more challenging opportunities, gave more encouragement, and invested additional emotional and educational energy into these special students. The students, in turn, began to internalize these elevated expectations. They were treated as if they were more capable, more intelligent, more promising, and gradually, almost imperceptibly, they started to embody those expectations. Their confidence grew. Their engagement deepened. Their academic performance began to rise. When the final academic assessment was conducted at the end of the term, the results were striking. The randomly selected students, those initially labeled as brilliant, had indeed outperformed their peers. They had not started with any inherent advantage, yet through the power of expectation, they had transformed their academic potential. This experiment unveils a profound psychological mechanism, the self-fulfilling prophecy. Our expectations, whether held by teachers, parents, managers, or ourselves, can become a powerful force of transformation. They are not just passive predictions, but active agents of change that can reshape performance, behavior, and potential. In educational contexts, this research carries tremendous significance. It challenges the traditional notion of fixed intelligence and suggests that potential is far more fluid than we previously understood. A teacher who believes in a student's capabilities can inadvertently create the conditions for that student to excel. But the implications extend far beyond the classroom. The self-fulfilling prophecy operates in countless areas of human interaction, in workplaces, relationships, personal development, and social dynamics. Our beliefs about others and about ourselves are not mere abstract thoughts. They are powerful scripts that can fundamentally alter outcomes. The experiment serves as a profound reminder of human potential. It suggests that growth is not solely about innate ability, but about the expectations and opportunities we create. It challenges us to be mindful of the subtle ways we communicate belief, potential, and possibility. For educators, parents, leaders, and individuals, the message is clear. Expectations matter. The way we see and treat others can become a self-fulfilling script, guiding them towards success or limitation. By recognizing this psychological mechanism, we can consciously create environments that nurture potential, challenge limitations, and unlock extraordinary possibilities. In the intricate dance of human potential, our expectations are not just passive observations. They are active creators of reality, shaping the very performance and potential they predict. Experiment 3. The Monster Experiment, the Power of Words in Shaping Human Potential. The controversial monster experiment, conducted in 1939 at the University of Iowa, has so starkly illustrated the profound impact of verbal communication on human development. Led by Wendell Johnson, this groundbreaking study would become a haunting testament to the extraordinary power of words to shape human psychology, particularly in children. The experiment was deceptively simple, yet psychologically complex. A group of orphan children were carefully divided into 3 distinct groups, each subjected to a different approach of verbal interaction. What emerged was a disturbing demonstration of how language and psychological conditioning can fundamentally alter a child's sense of self, confidence, and even physiological capabilities. The first group served as the control, receiving neutral and standard interactions. These children represented the baseline, untouched by the experimental manipulations that would dramatically affect the other 2 groups. They would provide the critical comparative context for understanding the experiment's outcomes. The second group became the focal point of negative verbal conditioning. These children were consistently told they had problematic speech patterns, that their communication was flawed and unacceptable. Each interaction was carefully designed to undermine their confidence, to make them feel inherently inadequate in their ability to speak. The third group experienced the polar opposite treatment. They were showered with positive reinforcement, constantly praised for their speaking abilities. Every utterance was met with enthusiasm and encouragement, creating an environment of psychological safety and linguistic empowerment. As the experiment progressed, the psychological impacts became increasingly apparent. The children in the second group, those subjected to constant verbal criticism, began to internalize the negative messaging. What started as external criticism gradually transformed into internal belief. They developed actual speech impediments, specifically lisps that had not existed before the experiment began. These children became shells of their former selves. Where once they might have been confident and expressive, they now became shy, reserved, and terrified of speaking. The fear of making a mistake, of being verbally reprimanded, had paralyzed their natural communicative abilities. Their speech became halting, their self-confidence shattered. Conversely, the children in the third group flourished. Constant positive reinforcement became a powerful psychological fuel. They became more articulate, more willing to experiment with language, more confident in their communicative abilities. Their speech improved not just marginally, but dramatically. The monster experiment revealed a fundamental psychological truth. Human development is profoundly influenced by the language used around and towards us. Children are not merely passive recipients of communication. They are active interpreters who internalize and embody the narratives constructed about them. The study demonstrated that verbal abuse can be as psychologically damaging as physical abuse, if not more so. Words are not just sounds. They are psychological constructs that can build or destroy a child's sense of self-worth. The children who were constantly criticized didn't just hear negative words. They became those words, allowing them to reshape their very perception of themselves. It is crucial to acknowledge the immense ethical problems with this experiment. The children subjected to negative conditioning suffered long-lasting psychological trauma. The researchers' actions would be considered profoundly unethical by modern standards, causing deliberate psychological harm to vulnerable orphan children. Many of the children in the negatively conditioned group experienced lifelong struggles with self-esteem, communication, and psychological well-being. The experiment crossed crucial ethical boundaries, treating human subjects as mere experimental objects rather than sentient beings deserving of respect and protection. Despite its deeply problematic methodology, the monster experiment offers a powerful lesson for parents, educators, and anyone involved in child development. It underscores the transformative power of positive reinforcement and the potentially devastating impact of constant criticism. The experiment serves as a stark reminder that our words are not mere sounds but powerful tools that can shape human potential. Children are not blank slates, but sensitive beings who absorb and internalize the narratives constructed around them. In the end, the monster experiment is less about the specific study and more about a fundamental human truth. We have the power to build or break the spirit of those around us, particularly children, through the language we choose to use. Experiment 4, the diagnosis deception, unmasking psychiatric judgment. In 1973, a groundbreaking study would shake the foundations of psychiatric diagnosis, challenging the very core of how mental health professionals perceived and classified mental illness. Led by psychologist David Rosenhan, the experiment would become a pivotal moment in understanding the subjective nature of psychiatric diagnosis and the potential dangers of institutional labeling. The experiment began with a simple yet radical premise. What happens when seemingly healthy individuals deliberately enter psychiatric hospitals, claiming to hear a single, ambiguous auditory hallucination? Rosenhan assembled a diverse group of 8 research associates and 5 additional participants, each carefully selected for their apparent mental health and professional backgrounds. Their mission was unprecedented: to test the diagnostic capabilities of psychiatric institutions by deliberately presenting themselves as patients. Each participant was instructed to approach a psychiatric hospital and report hearing a single specific voice, a voice that said thud, empty, or hollow. Beyond this single fabricated symptom, they were to behave completely normally. The results were both shocking and immediate. All 8 initial participants were admitted to different psychiatric hospitals across the United States, each diagnosed with various mental illnesses, primarily schizophrenia. Once admitted, the pseudo-patients immediately reverted to their normal behavior. They took notes, engaged in conversations, and attempted to demonstrate their mental health. Yet despite their obvious normality, each participant found themselves trapped in a bewildering system. To be released, they were required to acknowledge their supposed mental illness and agree to take antipsychotic medications, a requirement that exposed the profound disconnect between institutional perception and reality. The most disturbing aspect of the experiment was not just the initial misdiagnosis, but the persistent labeling that followed. Even when behaving completely normally, the pseudo-patients were viewed through the lens of their initial diagnosis. Their normal behaviors were reinterpreted as symptoms. Note-taking was seen as a sign of obsessive behavior. Normal conversations were analyzed for hidden psychological meanings. As if the first phase wasn't provocative enough, Rosenhan introduced a second, equally compelling challenge. He informed a prestigious psychiatric hospital that he would be sending additional fake patients to test their diagnostic capabilities. The hospital was confident in its ability to detect imposters, challenge in hand. Over the next weeks, the hospital staff meticulously screened incoming patients, identifying numerous individuals they believed were faking mental illness. The twist? Rosenhan had sent no one. The hospital staff had essentially fabricated potential fake patients, demonstrating a profound confirmation bias. Their eagerness to prove their diagnostic skills led them to misidentify genuine patients as potential imposters, revealing the deeply subjective nature of psychiatric diagnosis. The implications of the Rosenhan experiment were profound and far-reaching. It exposed critical flaws in psychiatric diagnosis: the tendency to see what one expects to see, the difficulty of escaping a psychiatric label once applied, and the potential for institutional biases to override objective observation. Psychiatric professionals were forced to confront uncomfortable truths. The study suggested that diagnostic labels were less about objective medical assessment and more about social and institutional contexts. It highlighted how easily normal behaviors could be pathologized once a mental illness label was applied. The experiment sparked extensive debate within psychiatric circles. It challenged the reliability of diagnostic criteria and prompted significant reforms in how mental health professionals approach diagnosis and patient assessment. Many institutions began to develop more rigorous, structured diagnostic approaches in response to Rosenhan's work. Today, the Rosenhan experiment remains a crucial case study in medical sociology, psychology, and ethics. It serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of critical thinking, the dangers of institutional bias, and the complex nature of mental health diagnosis. More than just a scientific experiment, it was a mirror held up to the psychiatric establishment, revealing not just the flaws in the system, but the fundamental human tendency to see what we expect to see, to categorize and label, sometimes at the expense of truly understanding individual human experience. Experiment 5. The Monopoly Experiment, when inequality meets perception. Paul Piff's innovative Monopoly study have captured the complex dynamics of privilege and self-perception. What began as a seemingly simple board game experiment would ultimately reveal profound insights into human nature, self-attribution, and the psychological mechanisms that sustain social inequality. The experiment's design was deceptively straightforward. 2 strangers would be brought into a laboratory setting, seated across from each other at a table, with a Monopoly board between them. But here's where the experiment diverged from a typical game night. One participant would be arbitrarily designated as the privileged player, receiving distinct advantages from the start. This privileged player would begin the game with twice the starting money compared to their opponent. Moreover, they were granted the additional benefit of rolling 2 dice instead of 1, allowing them to move further across the board with each turn. The other participant started with significantly fewer resources and limited mobility, creating an intentionally uneven playing field. As the game progressed, the differences became increasingly apparent. The advantaged player would move more quickly, acquire properties more easily, and build wealth at a dramatically accelerated rate. The disparity was not subtle. It was by design unmistakable. But the most fascinating aspect of the experiment emerged not during the gameplay, but in its aftermath. Once the game concluded, typically with the privileged player winning, almost as a foregone conclusion, Piff would pose a seemingly innocuous question. Why do you think you won? The responses were remarkable and deeply revealing. Despite being fully aware of their initial advantages, the winning players would consistently attribute their success to their own skill, strategy, and superior gameplay. They would speak confidently about their excellent decision-making, their strategic property acquisitions, and their shrewd financial management. Rarely would these players acknowledge the fundamental structural advantage they had been given. The extra money, the ability to move more quickly, the head start, these were conveniently forgotten or minimized in their narrative of personal achievement. This psychological mechanism is not just about a board game, it's a microcosm of broader societal dynamics. The experiment powerfully illustrates how individuals in privileged positions tend to internalize their success as a personal accomplishment, often overlooking or downplaying the systemic advantages that contributed to their achievement. Piff's study provides a compelling metaphor for real-world inequalities. Just as in the Monopoly experiment, many individuals born into more advantageous socioeconomic circumstances may genuinely believe their success stems purely from individual merit, rather than recognizing the complex web of privileges that have smoothed their path. The psychological defense mechanism at play is known as fundamental attribution error, the tendency to overemphasize personal characteristics and ignore situational factors when explaining an outcome. In the context of the Monopoly experiment, players were quick to credit their own abilities while systematically disregarding the unequal starting conditions. This research doesn't seek to diminish individual effort or achievement. Instead, it invites a more nuanced, empathetic understanding of success. It challenges us to look beyond surface-level narratives of personal accomplishment and recognize the often invisible scaffolding of opportunity that supports some individuals more robustly than others. The Monopoly experiment serves as a powerful reminder. Our perceptions of personal success are rarely as individual as we might believe. It encourages a more holistic view of achievement, one that acknowledges both personal agency and the complex social structures that shape our opportunities. In an era of increasing global inequality, Piff's simple yet profound experiment continues to resonate. It prompts us to ask uncomfortable but necessary questions. How much of our success is truly our own? And how might our understanding of achievement change if we were more willing to recognize the diverse starting lines from which different individuals begin their life's race? The game of Monopoly, it turns out, is about much more than buying properties and collecting rent. It's a mirror reflecting our most deeply ingrained psychological tendencies, a testament to the complex interplay between privilege, perception, and the stories we tell ourselves about success. Experiment 6, The Three Christs of Ypsilanti, When Delusion Meets Reality. Rare experiments are as simultaneously bizarre and compelling as Milton Rokeach's 1959 study at the Ypsilanti State Hospital in Michigan. What began as an audacious attempt to understand the nature of religious delusion would become a landmark exploration of human identity, belief, and the remarkable resilience of the human psyche. Rokeach, a social psychologist with an unconventional approach to research, orchestrated an unprecedented social experiment. His subjects were three men, each firmly convinced of the same extraordinary claim, that he was Jesus Christ. Leon, Claudio, and Joseph were patients at the psychiatric hospital, each living in a world where he was the one true Messiah, utterly convinced of his divine identity. The experiment's premise was simple yet radical. By forcing these three men to coexist, Rokeach hoped to create a crucible of confrontation that might somehow challenge or dissolve their shared delusion. He had been inspired by a previous case where two women who both claimed to be the Virgin Mary were placed together, with one reportedly breaking free from her delusion. From the moment the three Christs were introduced, the dynamics were explosive. Each man was absolutely certain of his own divine status, which meant, logically, that the others must be imposters. Their initial interactions were marked by intense conflict, with arguments quickly escalating to physical confrontations. The hospital became a battleground of competing messianic claims. Leon, perhaps the most vocal, would loudly proclaim his divine status while dismissing the others as mentally ill. Clyde and Joseph responded in kind, each believing himself to be the authentic Christ, while the others were clear manifestations of mental dysfunction. Their conversations became intricate dances of denial and self-affirmation. Rokeach deliberately provoked these confrontations, asking each man about the others, hoping to expose the fragility of their beliefs. But instead of breaking down, something unexpected happened. The men developed a curious survival mechanism. They began to avoid direct confrontation about their shared delusion, creating an unspoken agreement to coexist by simply not challenging each other's core belief. When pressed about the other Christs, they would typically respond with dismissive statements. "He's crazy" became a common refrain. They developed elaborate justifications for why the others were clearly imposters, while maintaining their own unshakable belief in their divine identity. The experiment raises profound questions about human psychology. How do we maintain beliefs in the face of direct contradictory evidence? What mechanisms of psychological defense allow individuals to preserve their most fundamental sense of self? Ethically, the study is deeply problematic. Rokeach essentially manipulated vulnerable patients, using them as subjects in a quasi-scientific theatrical production. He was not seeking to cure them, but to observe them, turning their mental health challenges into a form of psychological entertainment. No therapeutic breakthrough emerged. The men's delusions remained intact, their sense of self unbroken by the experiment. If anything, they developed more sophisticated methods of maintaining their beliefs, demonstrating the incredible resilience of deeply held convictions. Years later, Rokeach would express remorse about the experiment. In his 1981 book, The Three Christs of Ypsilanti, he acknowledged the ethical violations, admitting that he had been more interested in his own intellectual curiosity than in the genuine well-being of his subjects. The experiment stands today as a complex artifact of mid-20th century psychological research, a study that is at once fascinating, troubling, and profoundly human. It reminds us that identity is not a simple construct, and that the human mind possesses remarkable capabilities for maintaining its most cherished beliefs, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable contradictions. In the end, Leon, Clyde, and Joseph were not cured. They were subjects in a strange psychological drama, unwitting actors in an experiment that said far more about human belief, identity, and psychological defense mechanisms than it ever did about the nature of delusion itself. Experiment 7, The Surprising Threads That Connect Us. Milgram's Small World Experiment. In the decade before the internet transformed global communication, Stanley Milgram conducted a groundbreaking experiment that would forever change how we understand human social networks. The year was 1967, and the world seemed vast and disconnected. Milgram, a pioneering social psychologist, set out to challenge this perception with a simple yet ingenious study that would introduce the world to the concept of 6 degrees of separation. The experiment began in Wichita, Kansas, and Omaha, Nebraska, with a deceptively straightforward premise. Milgram distributed 160 letters to randomly selected individuals, each containing a specific challenge. Deliver a package to a target person, a stockbroker living in Boston, Massachusetts, using only personal connections. The rules were clear but challenging. Participants could not mail the package directly to the target. Instead, they were instructed to send the letter to someone they personally knew, who they believed might be closer to the target or more likely to know someone who could help. Each participant would pass the letter along, carefully documenting their connection and reasoning. Most people would assume such a task impossible. How could a letter possibly navigate through personal networks to reach a specific stranger hundreds of miles away? The conventional wisdom suggested the distance was insurmountable, the social connections too fragmented. But Milgram's results were nothing short of revolutionary. The letters didn't wander aimlessly. They followed surprisingly efficient paths. Most critically, the average number of steps required to reach the target was just 6. 6 personal connections, 6 degrees of separation, were typically enough to bridge what seemed like an impossible social distance. This wasn't just a statistical curiosity. It revealed something profound about human social structures. Even in an era without social media, email, or instant messaging, people were interconnected in ways far more intricate and powerful than anyone had previously imagined. Interestingly, the experiment revealed patterns in how people chose their connections. Participants tended to forward letters to individuals in similar social or professional circles. A farmer might send the letter to a local businessman, who might then forward it to a relative in a city, gradually narrowing the geographical and social distance. The most successful chains often involved strategic intermediaries, people who seemed to have broader social networks or who lived in more connected urban areas. These social bridges played crucial roles in reducing the distance between strangers. Milgram's experiment predated the internet by decades, yet it anticipated our modern understanding of network theory and social connectivity. Today, with social media platforms and global communication technologies, the 6 degrees concept seems almost obvious. But in 1967, it was a radical revelation about the hidden architecture of human relationships. The study didn't just provide a mathematical model of social networks. It offered a deeply humanistic insight. Despite our perceived isolation, we are fundamentally interconnected. Strangers are rarely more than a few personal introductions away from one another. Modern network scientists and sociologists continue to build upon Milgram's foundational work. His methodology has inspired countless studies exploring social networks, information spread, and human communication patterns. While the experiment had limitations, not all letters reached their destination, and the sample size was relatively small, its core insight remains powerful. We are part of a complex, intricate web of human relationships that transcends geographical and social boundaries. In an age of increasing digital connection and apparent social fragmentation, Milgram's experiment remains a poignant reminder. Beneath our perceived differences and distances, humanity is intimately, almost miraculously, interconnected. Experiment 8, The Mirror of Distortion, a Psychological Exploration. In the soft, flickering light of a single candle, reality begins to warp. What starts as a simple act of staring into a mirror transforms into a mind-bending journey of perceptual distortion. This is no ordinary optical illusion, but a psychological experiment that peers into the very edges of human perception and mental processing. The setup is deceptively simple: a dimly lit room, a mirror, a subject, and time, specifically 10 uninterrupted minutes of unblinking observation. But what unfolds during those moments challenges everything we understand about visual perception and self-recognition. Researchers have long been fascinated by this phenomenon, which creates a unique window into the human brain's complex mechanisms of perception. The experiment isn't just a parlor trick, it's a scientific probe into the boundaries of consciousness, hallucination, and self-perception. Participants report a cascade of increasingly bizarre experiences. The first signs are subtle: a slight blurring of facial features, a sense that something isn't quite right. Then the transformations begin. Some see their faces gradually morphing, features becoming distorted and unrecognizable. Others describe more dramatic hallucinations, faces of strangers emerging from their own reflection, monstrous transformations, or complete visual dissociation. One participant's personal account captures the unsettling nature of the experience. It started innocently enough, they recalled. I was staring, trying to maintain focus, when suddenly my face didn't look like my face anymore. It was like watching a stranger inhabit my reflection, a complete disconnect from my sense of self. The psychological mechanisms behind this phenomenon are complex. Sensory deprivation, combined with intense focused observation, appears to trigger a breakdown in the brain's normal perceptual processes. The lack of external stimuli, the constant low light, and the unbroken gaze create a perfect storm for hallucination. Researchers have drawn fascinating parallels between this mirror experiment and certain symptoms of schizophrenia. The visual distortions, the sense of disconnection from one's own image, mirrors some of the perceptual disruptions experienced by individuals with the disorder. It's a controlled environment that offers a glimpse into altered states of consciousness. But why does this happen? Neuroscientists point to several potential explanations. The human brain is constantly working to make sense of sensory input. In low-light conditions, with minimal external stimuli, the brain begins to fill in gaps, generate patterns, and create narratives. What we perceive as reality becomes a constructed experience, malleable and surprisingly fragile. The experiment reveals the thin line between perception and hallucination. Our sense of self, our understanding of reality, is more fluid than we'd like to believe. A few minutes of sustained, unbroken observation can unravel the carefully constructed narrative we maintain about our own identity. Not everyone experiences the same hallucinations. Some see monstrous transformations, others witness subtle shifts, and some report more abstract visual distortions. This variability suggests that the hallucinations are deeply personal, shaped by individual psychological landscapes, fears, and subconscious processes. For those brave enough to attempt the experiment, a few recommendations emerge. Psychological preparation is key. Understanding that what you're about to experience is a temporary perceptual shift can help maintain a sense of control. Having a supportive observer can also provide comfort and safety. Yet the experiment is not without risks. Individuals with pre-existing mental health conditions, particularly those prone to dissociative experiences or hallucinations, should approach such experiments with caution, if at all. The mirror hallucination experiment stands as a testament to the complexity of human perception. It challenges our understanding of reality, self-recognition, and the malleable nature of consciousness. In those 10 minutes of sustained observation, we are confronted with a fundamental question. How reliable is our perception of reality? As science continues to explore the intricate workings of the human mind, experiments like these offer a fascinating window into the mysterious landscape of consciousness, a reminder that reality is far more subjective than we often assume. Experimental 9. The Visual Cliff, Unveiling the Mystery of Infant Depth. Perception, only few experiments have been as elegantly simple and profoundly revealing as the visual cliff experiment. Conducted by psychologists Eleanor Gibson and Richard Walk in the 1960s, this groundbreaking study peeled back the layers of how human infants develop depth perception and learn to interpret visual space. Imagine a laboratory setup that looks more like an optical illusion than a scientific instrument. A large platform is divided into two distinct sections, one half solid and opaque, the other covered with a transparent glass surface. Beneath this transparent section, a dramatic drop is created, with a carefully designed checkered or polka-dotted surface positioned approximately 1 meter below. The experiment's brilliance lies in its simplicity. Researchers would place infants of varying ages on the solid platform, with their mothers positioned on the other side, sometimes on the solid section, sometimes on the transparent glass. The goal was deceptively straightforward. Would the babies crawl across to their mothers? What emerged was a fascinating progression of infant perception. Very young babies, typically around 1 or 2 months old, would crawl confidently across both the solid and transparent surfaces, showing no signs of fear or hesitation. To these tiny humans, depth meant nothing. The world was a flat, undifferentiated landscape of exploration. But something remarkable happened as infants approached the 6 to 14-month age range. Suddenly, they would stop precisely at the junction where the solid surface met the transparent glass. Their previously fearless crawling transformed into a moment of profound caution. They could perceive depth. They understood the potential danger of a fall. This wasn't just a cute behavioral quirk. It represented a critical milestone in human cognitive and perceptual development. The visual cliff experiment demonstrated that depth perception is not something we're born with, but a skill we develop. Babies learn to interpret visual cues, differences in texture, shading, and perspective, that signal potential danger or spatial complexity. The implications stretch far beyond a simple laboratory test. This research revealed how infants gradually construct their understanding of the physical world. It showed that perception is not a passive process, but an active one of learning and interpretation. Babies aren't just cute blobs of humanity. They're sophisticated learners, constantly making sense of their environment. Interestingly, The experiment wasn't just conducted with human infants. Researchers tested various animal species, finding that animals with different locomotion experiences responded differently. Ground-dwelling animals showed more pronounced depth perception, while those from more uniform environments displayed less caution. What makes this experiment particularly fascinating is how it captures a moment of biological adaptation. Fear of heights isn't an innate, genetic trait, but a learned response crucial for survival. It's a protective mechanism that develops as infants become mobile and start exploring their environment more independently. Modern neuroscience has since elaborated on these findings. We now understand that depth perception involves complex interactions between visual processing centers in the brain, vestibular systems that manage balance, and motor skill development. The visual cliff experiment was an early window into these intricate developmental processes. For parents and caregivers, the experiment offers a reminder of the incredible journey of infant development. Those moments when a baby suddenly seems more cautious, more aware of their surroundings, they're not random. They're evidence of a brain rapidly learning, categorizing, and making sense of the world. The visual cliff remains a cornerstone study in developmental psychology. It reminds us that human perception is not a static thing, but a dynamic, evolving process. From a seemingly simple setup of a platform, checkered floor, and curious babies, we gain profound insights into how we learn to see and understand the world around us. Babies, as the researchers discovered, are not just passive recipients of experience. They are active, intelligent learners, constantly constructing their understanding of reality, one cautious crawl at a time. Experiment 10. The Malleable Mind. Understanding Memory Reconsolidation. A groundbreaking scientific discovery has emerged that challenges our fundamental understanding of how we remember and perceive past events. Memory reconsolidation represents a revolutionary concept that reveals the startling truth. Our memories are not immutable recordings, but dynamic, ever-changing narratives that can be subtly and sometimes significantly altered each time they are recalled. Imagine your memory as a living document rather than a fixed photograph. When you retrieve a memory from the depths of your long-term memory, something extraordinary happens. The memory becomes temporarily unstable, like a piece of clay that can be reshaped before being hardened again. This process, known as reconsolidation, means that every time you remember something, you're not simply replaying a perfect recording, but potentially reconstructing and potentially modifying that memory. This phenomenon has profound implications across multiple domains of human experience. Perhaps most critically, it fundamentally challenges the reliability of eyewitness testimony. Contrary to popular belief, an eyewitness account is not a precise, unchanging record of events. Instead, it's a malleable narrative that can be unconsciously altered with each retelling, influenced by subsequent experiences, emotions, and even suggestions from others. Forensic psychologists and legal experts have long grappled with the unreliability of human memory. The reconsolidation process explains why two people can witness the same event and later provide dramatically different accounts. Each time a memory is retrieved, it becomes vulnerable to subtle changes, a shift in perspective, an emotional reinterpretation, or the inadvertent incorporation of external information. The most promising application of this research lies in the treatment of psychological trauma, particularly post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Therapists and researchers are developing innovative techniques that leverage memory reconsolidation to help patients process and transform traumatic memories. By carefully retrieving a traumatic memory and then introducing new, less threatening contextual information, clinicians can potentially reduce the emotional intensity of these memories. This approach represents a paradigm shift in psychological treatment. Traditional therapy often focused on talking through traumatic experiences, but memory reconsolidation suggests we can actually modify the memory itself. It's like having the ability to edit a painful manuscript, softening its most distressing chapters while preserving the essential narrative. Neuroscientists explain that this process occurs at the cellular level. When a memory is recalled, the neural pathways associated with that memory become temporarily destabilized. During this brief window, the memory can be chemically modified, potentially reducing its emotional charge or altering its specific details. It's a neurological form of editing, where the brain acts as both author and editor of our personal histories. The ethical and practical implications are vast. In legal settings, it underscores the need for corroborating evidence beyond eyewitness testimony. In therapeutic contexts, it offers hope for individuals struggling with debilitating memories. For philosophers and psychologists, it raises profound questions about the nature of memory, identity, and personal experience. However, this malleability is not without risks. The same mechanism that allows for healing can also potentially introduce false memories or unintentionally distort important recollections. It's a delicate neurological dance requiring careful ethical approach. As research continues, memory reconsolidation stands as a testament to the brain's incredible complexity. We are not passive repositories of experience, but active creators of our own narratives. Our memories are not stone tablets, but living, breathing entities that continue to evolve long after the original moment has passed. The next time you recall a cherished or painful memory, remember, you're not just remembering, you're recreating, reinterpreting, and potentially reshaping a fundamental piece of your personal history. Experiment 11. Whiskers of Compassion, Unraveling Empathy in Mice. In the quiet corridors of a behavioral research laboratory, an extraordinary experiment unfolded, one that would challenge our understanding of emotional intelligence in the animal kingdom. The study, both simple and profound, revealed a startling capacity for empathy in mice, a trait once thought to be exclusively human. The experimental setup was elegantly straightforward. Two mice were placed in adjacent chambers, separated by a transparent wall with a single door. Only one mouse, positioned on the right side, had the ability to open this door. What would unfold would become a powerful narrative of animal compassion. As the experiment progressed, researchers began to slowly fill the left mouse's chamber with water. The rising liquid created an increasingly distressing scenario, transforming the safe space into a potential death trap. The mouse trapped inside would undoubtedly experience mounting anxiety and fear as the water level climbed higher and higher. The mouse on the right side, witnessing this unfolding drama, faced a critical moment of decision. Would it remain passive, or would it intervene to save its companion? The results were both heartening and scientifically fascinating. The mice consistently chose compassion, opening the door to rescue their trapped companion from the rising water. But the experiment's most intriguing revelation came in the subsequent trials. Mice who had previously experienced being trapped in the flooding chamber, those who intimately understood the terror of potential drowning, demonstrated a significantly faster response when rescuing other mice. Their previous experience had not just been a moment of survival, but a profound lesson in empathy. These mice weren't merely acting on instinct or responding to distress signals. They were demonstrating a nuanced understanding of another's suffering. Having personally experienced the overwhelming fear of potential drowning, they recognized and responded to a similar predicament faced by another mouse. This wasn't just a reflexive action, but a calculated, compassionate response. The implications of this experiment extend far beyond the immediate research. For decades, scientific discourse has grappled with the origins and manifestations of empathy. While philosophers and psychologists have long debated whether empathy is a learned behavior or an innate trait, this mouse experiment provides compelling evidence of emotional intelligence in non-human mammals. Traditionally, empathy has been viewed through a distinctly human lens. We've often considered our capacity for understanding and sharing the feelings of others as a uniquely human characteristic. This experiment challenges that narrow perspective, suggesting that the roots of compassion might run deeper in the animal kingdom than we previously understood. The mice in this study weren't just responding to a biological imperative to preserve their species. They were exhibiting a sophisticated emotional response that mirrored what we would recognize as genuine compassion in humans. They understood suffering, they remembered their own experiences, and they chose to help. Moreover, the experiment highlights the importance of lived experience in developing empathy. The mice who had previously been trapped didn't just rescue faster, they seemed to rescue with a deeper understanding. Their prior suffering had transformed into a form of emotional wisdom, allowing them to more quickly and effectively help another in distress. Such research opens up fascinating questions about the nature of consciousness, emotional intelligence, and the complex inner lives of animals we've often dismissed as simple or instinctual. If mice can demonstrate such profound empathy, what other emotional capacities might exist in the animal world that we have yet to understand? The whiskers of compassion twitch with a message both simple and profound. Empathy is not a human monopoly, but a complex emotional response that might be more widespread in nature than we ever imagined. Experiment 12. Blindsightedness, the mysterious realm of unconscious vision. Only few phenomena are as fascinating and perplexing as blindsightedness, a neurological condition that challenges our fundamental understanding of perception, consciousness, and the human brain's remarkable adaptability. Nestled at the back of the human skull, where the cranium begins to curve toward the neck, lies the visual cortex, a critical region responsible for processing the complex visual information captured by our eyes. This small but pivotal area of the brain translates the raw visual data into meaningful images, allowing us to navigate, recognize, and interact with our environment. However, when this region sustains significant damage, the consequences extend far beyond simple vision loss. Traditionally, medical professionals believe that damage to this area resulted in complete blindness, an assumption that suggested the eyes themselves were fundamentally compromised. Modern research has unveiled a far more nuanced reality. In cases of severe trauma, such as a catastrophic fall or a significant head injury, the eyes remain fully functional, continuing to capture visual information. The true disruption occurs in the brain's ability to process and consciously interpret these visual signals. Imagine a scenario where an individual's visual cortex has been damaged. Their eyes continue to function perfectly, sending electrical signals through the optic nerve. Yet when these signals reach the damage processing center, something extraordinary happens. Instead of generating a coherent visual experience, the brain becomes unable to consciously see anything. To the individual, the world appears completely dark. But here's where the story becomes truly remarkable. Despite their conscious blindness, these individuals demonstrate an astonishing ability to interact with their visual environment in ways that seem to defy logic. In carefully controlled experimental settings, researchers have observed patients successfully navigating complex environments, avoiding obstacles, and responding to visual stimuli, all without any conscious awareness of doing so. In one illustrative experiment, a patient with blindsightedness was asked to walk down a corridor lined with various obstacles. Conventional wisdom would suggest they would repeatedly bump into these objects. Instead, the individual moved with surprising grace, subtly adjusting their path to avoid each obstacle. When questioned about their navigation, they expressed complete bewilderment, insisting they could see nothing. This phenomenon reveals a profound insight into the brain's complex neural networks. While the primary visual processing route might be damaged, alternative pathways exist, subcortical routes that allow visual information to be processed unconsciously. These pathways can trigger motor responses, spatial awareness, and even emotional reactions to visual stimuli, all occurring beneath the threshold of conscious perception. The implications of blindsightedness extend far beyond a mere neurological curiosity. They challenge our understanding of consciousness, perception, and the intricate ways our brain constructs our experience of reality. It suggests that what we consciously see is just a fraction of the visual information our brain continuously processes. For neuroscientists and psychologists, blindsightedness represents a window into the brain's extraordinary plasticity, its ability to adapt, reroute, and find alternative solutions when traditional pathways are disrupted. It underscores the brain's remarkable capacity to develop compensatory mechanisms, ensuring survival and functionality even under challenging circumstances. As research continues, blindsightedness promises to unlock deeper mysteries about human perception, consciousness, and the complex neural mechanisms that shape our understanding of the world. It reminds us that our perception is not a simple, straightforward process, but a sophisticated, multifaceted experience shaped by intricate neural interactions we are only beginning to comprehend. Experiment 13. The fragile nature of memory, how words can reshape eyewitness testimony. In the world of psychological research, Few studies have illuminated the intricate workings of human memory as powerfully as Elizabeth Loftus and John Palmer's groundbreaking 1974 experiment on eyewitness testimony. Their research would become a cornerstone in understanding how language can fundamentally alter our recollection of events. Elizabeth Loftus had long been fascinated by the remarkable malleability of human memory. Unlike the popular belief that memories are like perfect video recordings stored in our brains, her research suggested something far more complex and dynamic. Memories, she discovered, are not static snapshots but fluid, reconstructive processes that can be significantly influenced by subsequent information. The core of her interest lay in how eyewitness testimony, often considered crucial evidence in legal proceedings, could be dramatically altered by the subtlest of linguistic cues. What if the very words used to ask about an event could change how that event was remembered? In their landmark study, Loftus and Palmer recruited 45 students from the University of Washington to participate in a meticulously designed experiment. The setup was deceptively simple yet ingenious. Participants would watch 7 different films depicting traffic accidents, each lasting between 5 and 30 seconds. After viewing the films, students were asked to describe the accidents as if they were actual witnesses. Then came the critical moment. They were posed a seemingly straightforward question about the vehicle's speed, but with a crucial linguistic twist. The researchers varied a single word in their question. About how fast were the cars going when the verbs changed subtly: smashed, collided, bumped, hit, contacted. The results were remarkable. The verb used in the question dramatically influenced participants' perception of the accident's speed. When asked about cars that smashed into each other, participants estimated the speed at 40.8 miles per hour. In contrast, when the same accident was described as cars that merely contacted each other, the estimated speed plummeted to 31.8 miles per hour. This wasn't just a minor variation. It represented a substantial 9-mile-per-hour difference based solely on the verb used. Loftus and Palmer proposed 2 potential explanations for this phenomenon. 1. Response bias factors. The different words might simply influence how participants answered, without actually changing their memory of the event. 2. Memory reconstruction. The critical verb could fundamentally alter the participant's perception and subsequent memory of the accident, effectively rewriting their mental narrative. The researchers didn't stop with this initial study. Intrigued by their findings, they designed follow-up experiments to explore whether these linguistic cues could actually create false memories, not just influence reporting, but genuinely alter recollection. The implications of their research extend far beyond academic curiosity. In legal settings, psychological counseling, and everyday communication, this study highlighted a profound truth. Our memories are not the infallible records we often believe them to be. Eyewitness testimony, once considered the gold standard of evidence, could be dangerously unreliable. A carefully worded question could potentially reconstruct an entire memory, introducing details that never existed in the original experience. Loftus and Palmer's experiment revolutionized our understanding of human memory. It demonstrated that remembering is not a passive retrieval of stored information, but an active, constructive process continuously shaped by our current context, expectations, and the way information is presented. Their work serves as a powerful reminder of the complex, dynamic nature of human cognition, where reality and perception dance in a delicate, often misleading choreography. Experiment 14. The Silent Surrender, Conformity's Psychological Grip. Solomon Asch's groundbreaking experiments in the 1950s unveiled a profound psychological mechanism that challenges our understanding of individual judgment and social pressure. At the heart of his research lies a simple yet provocative question. How much do people compromise their own perception when confronted with collective disagreement? The experimental setup was deceptively straightforward. A group of participants would gather in a room, ostensibly to participate in a visual perception test. Unknown to the primary subject, most of the individuals present were carefully coached actors. Their role was to deliberately provide incorrect answers at predetermined moments, creating a social environment of manufactured consensus. On a large board, 3 lines of varying lengths would be displayed alongside a comparison line. The task seemed elementary. Simply identify which of the three lines match the length of the comparison line. For the first few rounds, the actors would select the correct answer, lulling the genuine participant into a false sense of security and shared understanding. Then the psychological pressure would begin. Gradually, the actors would start unanimously selecting an obviously incorrect line. The real participant, isolated and increasingly uncomfortable, faced an excruciating internal dilemma. Should they trust their own clear visual perception or yield to the collective judgment of the group? The results were remarkable and deeply unsettling. Approximately 75% of participants conformed to the group's incorrect answer at least once during the experiment. Some participants later reported experiencing intense psychological discomfort, describing moments of genuine doubt about their own sensory perception. More nuanced was the follow-up experiment that introduced a critical variation. This time, among the actors delivering incorrect responses, one would consistently provide the correct answer. This subtle intervention transformed the psychological landscape. With just one voice of dissent, participants' likelihood of maintaining their authentic perception dramatically increased. This variation revealed a fundamental human psychological mechanism. Isolation breeds self-doubt, but solidarity, even from a single source, can reinforce individual conviction. The presence of one ally fundamentally altered participants' willingness to challenge group consensus. Ash's experiments exposed the complex interplay between individual perception and social dynamics. They demonstrated that human beings are not purely rational decision-makers, but deeply social creatures whose judgments are constantly negotiated between personal experience and collective influence. The implications extend far beyond a simple laboratory experiment. These findings illuminate how conformity operates in real-world scenarios, from workplace dynamics and political movements to personal relationships and cultural narratives. We witness similar mechanisms in corporate environments where employees suppress innovative ideas, political contexts where dissenting voices are marginalized, and social groups where individual authenticity is sacrificed for belonging. Critically, the experiments do not suggest human weakness, but reveal our sophisticated social adaptation. Conformity isn't merely about fear of judgment. It's a nuanced survival strategy that has enabled collective problem-solving and group cohesion throughout human history. Modern psychological research continues to build upon Ash's foundational work. Neuroscientific studies using functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, have shown that social conformity activates reward centers in the brain, suggesting that alignment with group perception provides a neurochemical sense of safety and acceptance. The experiments also prompt profound philosophical questions about the nature of truth, perception, and individual agency. When does collective agreement transform from a collaborative tool to a mechanism of psychological suppression? How do we balance the human need for social connection with the imperative of maintaining personal integrity? Ash's research remains a powerful reminder that our perceptions are far more malleable than we'd like to believe. It challenges us to cultivate critical thinking, to periodically step back and examine whether our beliefs genuinely originate from personal conviction or are unconscious echoes of surrounding voices. In an age of digital echo chambers and polarized social narratives, the lessons of the Ash experiments resonate more powerfully than ever. They invite us to be courageous in our individual perceptions, while remaining humble about the complexity of human social interaction. Experiment 15, the precarious bridge of perception, unraveling emotional mislabeling. Psychological research often reveals surprising insights into human behavior, and the 1974 study by Aaron and Dutton stands as a compelling demonstration of how physiological states can dramatically influence social interactions. The experiment was elegantly simple yet profound. Researchers positioned themselves near two distinct bridges crossing a rocky river in British Columbia. One a solid, sturdy suspension bridge, and the other a narrow, rickety structure that swayed precariously with each step. As men crossed these bridges, an attractive female research assistant strategically positioned herself at the end, approaching each participant under the guise of conducting a study about scenic attractions and creative expression. Her approach was calculated. Each participant would be asked to complete a questionnaire, and write a short narrative about an ambiguous image. Crucially, she would hand them her contact information, ostensibly for follow-up questions about the research. What emerged from this carefully designed scenario was a fascinating psychological phenomenon. Men who had traversed the unstable, anxiety-inducing bridge were significantly more likely to contact the female researcher later. The researchers hypothesized that participants were misattributing their physiological arousal, the residual anxiety and heightened bodily responses from navigating the dangerous bridge, to romantic or sexual attraction. This misattribution isn't just a quirk of human perception, it's a window into how our emotional and physiological states can be misconstrued. The body's heightened state of alertness, characterized by increased heart rate, rapid breathing, and heightened sensory awareness, can be easily mislabeled when the original source of stimulation is no longer present. The implications extend far beyond a single experimental scenario. This research illuminates how emotional and physical states can be transferred or misinterpreted in social interactions. Adrenaline from fear, excitement, or physical exertion can be unconsciously reframed as attraction or other emotions, highlighting the complex interplay between physiological arousal and psychological interpretation. Subsequent research has expanded on this concept, exploring how similar misattribution occurs in various contexts, from dating to marketing, from therapeutic interventions to understanding risk-taking behavior. The study challenges simplistic notions of emotional experience, revealing the intricate ways our brains process and categorize physiological responses. Modern psychological understanding sees this not as a flaw in human cognition, but as an adaptive mechanism. Our ability to rapidly recontextualize physiological states potentially helped our ancestors navigate complex social and environmental challenges, providing flexibility in interpreting bodily signals. The experiment also raises ethical considerations about emotional manipulation and consent. While the research was groundbreaking, it prompts critical discussions about how physiological states can be leveraged in interpersonal dynamics. For aspiring psychologists and those fascinated by human behavior, the misattribution of arousal study remains a cornerstone example of how nuanced and unexpected human emotional processing can be. It reminds us that our perceptions are far more malleable and context-dependent than we might initially assume.